Hey guys, first Regardsman here, and I'll be talking about every single melee weapon in Space Marine 2 patch 14 and tier listing them. And now, this patch has given us some new heroic options. I'll be going through all the Relic tier and heroic variants today because a lot of you guys have asked me to do that. So, starting off, we're going to be talking about the Power Axe. Now, the Power Axe has been a very strong weapon in Space Marine 2, really since patch 11. That's when they buffed up the block variant. We also have a brand new Encarmine axe from like back in patch 13. And I would say the Power Axe is a top tier S pick at the moment, mainly because this weapon is best in slot for a concussive force shield bash bulwark, one of the most damaging builds in the entire game. It's also best in slot, or like adjacent to best in slot, with the Vanguard's melee setups, and really just like one of his best weapons in general. And the Power Axe is a very powerful pick on pretty much every class it is on. The Power Backstep does a ton for you against Tyranids and Chaos especially, and the block variant ever since that patch 11 buff has been in a very good spot, so definitely up in the S tier in my opinion. Next weapon here is the Encarmine Axe. Now, the Encarmine Axe is, in my opinion, like a side grade to the normal block axe. This one does a ton of work. The heroic perk effect allows you to store up your power backstep, which doesn't sound like much initially, but the more you play with the Power Axe and this weapon, the more you realize that storing up a power backstep is actually pretty good, because this one brings you a ton of extra cleaving potential. You have double the speed of a standard block variant, and will also have a pretty decent damage output. So I would say this one's pretty equivalent to the normal Power Axe. It's just like a little worse in some areas, but it's kind of the whole point because it's supposed to be a side grade. Next weapon here is the Thunderhammer. Now, the Thunderhammer has gone through a ton of buffs in Space Marine 2's life cycle. When the game first came out, this weapon was absolutely dog shit, but as they buffed up things like block weapons, balanced damage overall, this thing has gotten progressively better. And back in patch 10, they upped the AoE of the Ground Slam and the Aftershock. That made this weapon way better, and a huge effect of this weapon on classes like Assault is that, unlike every other melee weapon for the Assault class, this one actually has 100 cleave on his ground pound, which means you can hit up to 100 enemies at once and still deal damage to them on the ground pound. Every other option has a 15 cleave base, so this one is incredibly powerful, and I would say it goes up into the S tier, honestly, for Assault class. Maybe not for Bulwark. Like in Bulwark, I'd probably put it in like the A or B tier because he just does not have the same synergy, but for Assault, S for sure. I think this weapon is very strong. Now, for the Storm's Dominion, this weapon is not strong at all. I put this one like C, or probably just C tier, maybe even D tier to be honest. I think this is like the most overrated heroic in the entire game, besides maybe the Ultima Ratio I'll get into later, but this one gives you a shock area effect on your aftershocks. That is not a very strong effect at all. You are way better off with the balance and block versions, and those ones just overperform in pretty much all the content they're in, which is why they've been taken to a much more difficult content than this one, and this one does not perform at that same tier. But that being said, it's not a god-awful weapon. Like, it is the best fencing hammer in the game technically. It's just that the heroic perk effect does not really bridge the gap between the Relic tier variants. Now, the next weapon here is the brand new heroic Lord Executioner's Axe hammer thing. Now, this one is very close to the other Thunderhammer. In fact, I might actually put this one up in like the A tier. I don't think it's as strong as the Relic tier block hammer, only because the aftershocks, I think, are a bit better than the spinning effect here. But that being said, the whirling strike effect on the Lord Executioner's Axe, this is a strong effect. The radius of that spin is much larger than you might think initially. It does a ton of work for you and will catch enemies behind you all the time. So really strong option for him. And a block Thunderhammer in general is going to be better than a fencing one, because really what you want on a charge up attack weapon like this is damage. And this one definitely has that. It's just not quite on the level of the block hammer or like the balance hammer synergies with the classes like Assault, though on Bulwark I think this one is better than like a balance hammer Relic tier would be. But that being said, I don't think it quite bridges the gap between like the S tier and the A. But that being said, I think Lord Executioner's Axe is still up here. Now, the next weapon here is the Power Sword. The Power Sword is another success story in Space Marine 2. This weapon has gone through multiple buffs, the most recent one being in patch 13 really upped the base speed to be significantly higher. It feels way better now. This weapon is a pretty strong option. I don't quite think it's S tier. I don't think it's on like the level of the Power Axe or Thunderhammer on like any build setup, That being said, this weapon does a ton of work, and the horde clear here against my Norris is like top tier for sure. This one can do serious damage on the power whirls and the power style attacks against Hormigons and Zangors, and whenever I use the power sword, I realize that this weapon really does perform well in hordes where other weapons like the power axe even can struggle. So just for that reason, I would put it up in the A, and the power rake attacks on this also hit very hard, so a really good option overall. And the block power sword can do a ton of work on those power rolls with the double block charges for that damage boost and also the stagger, so definitely an A tier. Next weapon here is the heroic variant with the Xenophase Blade. I think the Xenophase Blade is like the best of the balanced options for heroic weapons. This one is very strong. The heroic perk effect will give you a 20% damage buff and wider arcs on your power rakes, which doesn't sound that much initially, but this one has a vertical cone increase and a horizontal cone increase, which means that the Xenophase Blade is really good at catching out Neurothropes and Zoanthropes. You are able to cut them out of the sky, and things like Enlightened Zangors as well. Whenever I played the Xenophase Blade, I kind of realized, like, wow, this weapon really does catch enemies I would not suspect. I don't know if I'd quite rank it above the Salamander Power Sword or the base Power Sword variants. I think it's much more of a side grade, but it's definitely up here in the A. I think this is a very cool weapon. If we're talking about like how it looks, the Xenophase Blade is S tier in just drip for sure. Now, the next weapon is the newest heroic variant, which is the Salamander's Power Sword. This one is focused on light attacks. You have a heroic perk effect called Nocturne's Retort that will allow you to store up to 6 in power stacks, gaining 3 per perfect parry. This one also has a active frame window on the parry equivalent to a block weapon, so like it's slightly shorter than a normal fencing one. But that being said, every light attack you do in speed style for an empower stack will give you a 300% damage bonus, and the big benefit of this weapon is that it allows you to skip over other perk effects like overcharge and pick different stuff, because unlike every other power sword in the game, this one does not need to use its power rakes as much. Like every other one with the power sword and Xenophase, these things pretty much always rely on the power rake to do serious damage. This one does not. Unlike things like the Tech Marine, you can take Omnissian Axe Deflection or Methodical Destruction. You can take stuff like Armor Reinforcement on the Assault and not really care. And I think just for that reason, it's a super nice option adjacent to these two, so I put up here. I do think this one is better than the Xenophase Blade, and like honestly, I think this one's just the best power sword at the moment overall, so I probably put it up here, but they're all pretty damn close to each other. Next weapon here is the Combat Knife. So the Combat Knife is, in my opinion, the worst of the base melee weapons in the game right now. It's not bad by any means. The big problem with this one is that it's pretty much power crept entirely by its 2 heroic variants, and even though patch 13 did buff up the block knife to be a bit faster and it does feel a bit better there, it's still not worth taking over the heroic options in my opinion. So I probably put this one in like the C tier. It's not a bad weapon, it's just like, you know, you have way better options on those heroic variants, like the Argent Edge. Okay, so the Argent Edge. This is probably the best heroic in the entire game. This is one of the best weapons in the game, period, and is by far the best fencing option in all of Space Marine 2 and the best defensive weapon, because every single parry you do on this weapon will stagger the enemy you are trying to defend against, and that means that things like a triple Ravener hit combo will be interrupted instantaneously, things like a triple Terminator sword combo, and those are the combos that will kill you in Space Marine 2. The way you die in this game is by getting stun locked or like frame trapped into bosses usually, and Argent Edge, this thing can save your life in those situations, because a lot of people think a minigun Terminator is the hardest extremis in the game on the Chaos faction. The reality is the melee Terminators are way scarier because they are the ones that actually frame trap you, and the Argent Edge can completely circumvent that. So up here in the S, the Argent Edge is just that good. Next weapon here is the Power Gladius. This thing is pretty strong, not as strong as the Argent Edge, but you can definitely one-shot bosses on this option. I think it is in a pretty good spot. The only thing really holding back this weapon is that it is a balanced weapon, which does kind of limit its overall parry window, because balanced weapons outside of the Assault class are not very good, because on the Assault, you can use your jump pack dash to animation cancel out of your parry window, which is really nice to circumvent the awkward parry window of this thing, but this one is only on the Vanguard, Sniper, and TAC, and because of that, you do kind of have that limited window the entire time. Now, the heroic perk effect here can give you up to 360% bonus melee damage, which is really strong for an off-spec scan Shadow Stab, which is actually way more practical than you might think. I do one-shot bosses on this all the time in both Chaos and the Tyranid faction on Tactical, but even with that, I don't think it's quite at the level of the Argent Edge, so I'd probably put in like a low A, maybe even like a high B, but I think A is pretty fair. Next weapon here is the base Chainsword. Now, the Chainsword is pretty good. I think it's been power crept a bit by the Power Sword. I don't think it's as strong as this Relic tier weapon is, and the only one I would ever take for like the base variant of the Chainsword here is the block version, but that one's pretty slow, and there's a way better block version we'll get into in a second, but the Chainsword I think is firmly in B. It's not bad. I think it's definitely better than the Combat Knife is right now, but I think the Power Sword has definitely kind of gotten like a little over leveled compared to this one, and it's definitely not even close to the Power Axe or the Thunder Hammer on like any of the build setups. The next weapon here is the Double Edge Relic, or not even Color's Teeth, the Double Edge Relic here, which is the heavy attack fist fight option. This one is a total gimmick. It gives you a 15% bonus damage to your heavy attacks, allows you to combo skip into things like your double stomp. That being said, this thing is super fun. I actually like this one a lot. I don't think it's that weak either, and the gimmick effect here is way better than most gimmick effects in Space Marine 2, because like some weapons have dog shit gimmicks, like the Deathwatch Power Fist we'll get into later, but this one's is pretty strong, and on an overcharged build in Assault, I think the balanced parry window here isn't that bad at all. If I play Wings of Flame with this and just stomp into a bunch of Tyranids, that is really entertaining to play with, and the whole point of Space Marine 2 is to be entertained, and this one's really not that bad compared to other options anyway, so I'd say B tier. It's pretty equivalent to normal Chainsword. I don't think you really go wrong with these weapons, it's just some options are a bit better. Now, the next weapon here is actually God tier though. This is the White Scar's Chainsword. This is a 12 strength, 8 speed block chainsword that can stack up to 3 Adrenaline Surge stacks, and the final stack will last like double the length almost of a normal Adrenaline Surge length, which is kind of insane. This weapon is the best Chainsword. This is one of the best melee weapons in the game. If I'm playing Vanguard, I'm either taking this or the Power Axe, and if I'm playing the Assault, this is definitely the best Chainsword on him. Also the best Chainsword on the Bulwark class. Also the best Chainsword on the Tactical class. So best in slot, S tier easy. I think it's a little bit below the Argent Edge, but I think it's definitely equivalent to the Power Axe, if not a bit stronger in a lot of areas. So White Scar's Chainsword, incredible pick. I think if you're going to choose 2 heroic melee weapons, these are the ones I would get first, alongside things like the Salamander Power Sword, maybe the Xenophase, and also the Lord Executioner's Axe. Now, the next weapon here is the Omnissian Axe. This weapon is a weapon that is only good on the Tech Marine, but thankfully it's only on the Tech Marine because he kind of circumvents all the awkward moments of this weapon, because this one is all about charging into enemy fire. You get a 50% range damage reduction on your charge attacks. You can also use the balanced parry window here, or the balanced variant I should say, to one combo Majoris, which is really strong on the Tech Marine. And Tech Marine is also able to stagger enemies off his free animation gun strikes with the servo gun to make the charge up attacks go off way more often. It is a very strong combo on him, but like, hey, I mean, this weapon was made for him, which makes perfect sense. I think this one is definitely a strong pick. Maybe not like S tier, but A tier for sure. And if you want to put it up in the S, I honestly can't blame you. This weapon is very strong. It's just that its strongest variant is the balanced one, and the block one definitely falls behind, and it's a heroic one that we'll get into in a second. It's not strong at all. So now, with that being said, let's talk about the Ultima Ratio. This weapon got buffed this patch, and this weapon is still bad. There's just no reason to really use this. This one's whole heroic perk effect is based on using the charge attack, and that charge attack can actually trigger perk effects like a methodical destruction, but even with that, there's just no reason to take this over the normal like balance on the Omnissian Axe version. The charge attacks or the lunging attacks of this one can already build up to one-shot Majoris on absolute, and this one's overall damage is way worse, and you are also giving up your enormously powerful AoE charge attacks that this one just cannot replicate. So I'd say this one's down D, probably the worst heroic in the entire game, besides one we'll get into in a second. Now, the next weapon here is the Relic tier Power Fist. The Power Fist is S tier, okay? This weapon's been S tier for ages. I think this one is honestly kind of cracked, and all you have to do with the Power Fist really on the balance and block version is just charge up your charge attacks and punch the guy, and you'll one-shot Majoris, and like with the Overcharge perk, this one is incredibly potent in all content of the game. It has been kind of insane for a while, though I will say it is not the most entertaining weapon to use, and it's pretty equivalent on a lot of builds to the Power Axe or like White Scar's Chainsword, but the Power Fist is just kind of cracked, and it's been that way for a while. Now, the next one here is the Deathwatch Power Fist. The Deathwatch Power Fist is dog shit. This weapon's Melt-a-Blast heroic effect is just one of the worst heroic effects in the entire game. It does pretty much nothing for you. Like, this weapon's effect is just such a gimmick that there is no reason to ever use this Melt-a-Blast over a normal Power Fist charge attack, and really all you're doing for this weapon is giving up the damage of a normal balanced Power Fist, because this one has 16 strength, a Relic tier balanced Power Fist has 19, and you're getting like a shitty Melt-a-Blast as a little consolation prize. So there is really no reason to take this one ever over the normal Power Fist variant unless you really want to use like a goofy effect. There are quite a few ways they could fix this, for like if they made the Melt-a-Blast immediately follow up after a thrust jab or after a lunging attack, that would feel a lot better, and also the animation time needs to be a lot faster. But for now, Deathwatch Power Fist, don't waste your time on this weapon, it kind of sucks. Now, the next weapon here, and the final one, is the Death's Grasp Power Fist. This is the other heroic variant we got in patch 11, and this one's actually pretty good. This one gives you free gun strikes every single time you execute an enemy on a adjacent Majoris, and also gives you 200% bonus damage on your light attacks, and also gives you a 50% reduction on your heavy attacks, which all sounds pretty good and potentially pretty bad, but having a 200% bonus on light attacks, hey, guess what? That's really all it takes to actually make a weapon like this have strong light attacks, and I'd say this one is probably the most noob-friendly weapon in the entire game for melee, because all you have to do on Bulwark or Assault is just take the Armor Reinforcement perk and just farm gun strikes over and over and just get executes and go back into it. It fits into the loop perfectly. You don't have to worry about anything like charge attacks. So I'd say this one goes up in like the low A, honestly. It's a very strong weapon. It's just not quite as strong as a normal Power Fist, but it's definitely a good option. And that is pretty much everything I have to say about the melee weapons in Space Marine 2 patch 14. Now, obviously, this is just my opinion. I'm sure a lot of you guys have different opinions on which weapons you like in the game. And let me know about that in the comments section below. And also, just because one weapon is up in S tier does not mean you're required to use it. You can use whatever you want, even if that's the Ultima Ratio or the Deathwatch Power Fist. We're just comparing them to each other in this list. And that's all I have to say in this one. And if you like content like this, subscribe for more. If you want to catch me live to ask you questions about the game or just come hang out, you can find me here on YouTube or on Twitch with a link in the video description, and also a link to my community Discord. And as always, thank you for watching. Take it easy. Bye.